We will continue part two of the most dangerous game because we ran out of time. So we'll complete page 61. We'll start at line 220. You'll have a cocktail, Mr. Rainsford, he suggested. The cocktail was surpassingly good, and Rainsford noted the table appointments were of the finest, the linen, the crystal, the china, the silver. They were eating borscht, the rich red soup with whipped cream so dear to Russian palates. Half apologetically, General Zaroff said, "We do our best to preserve the amenities of civilization here. Please forgive any lapses. We are well off the beaten track, you know. Do you think the champagne has suffered from its long ocean trip?" "Not in the least," declared Rainsford. He was finding the general a most thoughtful and affable host, a true cosmopolite. But there was one small trait of the general's that made Rainsford uncomfortable. Whenever he looked up from his plate, he found the general studying him, appraising him narrowly. "Perhaps," said General Zaroff, "you were surprised that I recognized your name. You see, I read all books on hunting published in English, French, and Russian. I have but one passion in my life, Mr. Rainsford, and it is the hunt." "You have some wonderful heads here," said Rainsford, as he ate a particularly well-cooked filet mignon. "That Cape buffalo is the largest I ever saw." "Oh, that fellow? Yes, he was a monster. Did he charge you?" "Hurled me against a tree," said the general. "Fractured my skull, but I got the brute." "I've always thought," said Rainsford, "that the Cape buffalo is the most dangerous of all big game." For a moment the general did not reply. He was smiling his curious red-lipped smile. Then he ate slowly. Then he said slowly, "No, you are wrong, sir. The Cape buffalo is not the most dangerous big game." He sipped his wine. "Here in my preserve on this island," he said in the same slow tone, "I hunt more dangerous game." Rainsford expressed his surprise. "Is there big game on this island?" The general nodded. "The biggest." "Really?" "Oh, it isn't here naturally, of course. I have to stock the island." All right, let's go back and review what we have read so far. We know that when the story starts out, Rainsford is on a yacht in the Caribbean islands, and he's having a conversation with Whitney. Whitney tells him that the sailors that pass by this area of the Caribbean are very superstitious, and they all have these feelings of something's very wrong with this island, okay? So Rainsford suggests maybe it was cannibals, but Whitney said no. If you don't know what a cannibal is, please look it up. So they go on to have a conversation, and then Whitney tells Rainsford that he's going to sleep and bids him good night. Rainsford says that he's not sleepy yet, and he's going to go up on the afterdeck to have another smoke on his pipe. So when he reaches the upper deck, all of a sudden he loses his pipe, and when he reaches over the side of the yacht to try to retrieve it, he falls overboard. Okay, so it is pitch black, and he is swimming with all of his strength, trying to reach the shore. And all of a sudden, he hears a gunshot, and a gunshot fired 3 times. So he follows it, the sound of it, and he ends up reaching the shore, and he climbs up, and he's at the foot of the jungle. And he's so tired by now that he falls sound asleep, okay? When he wakes up, he knew from the sun that it was late afternoon, and he was starving. And he thought, where there are pistol shots, there are men, and where there are men, there has to be food. So he starts looking, and he sees the jungle. He saw no sign of a trail through the weeds and the trees. So he decided to continue walking along the shore. But all of a sudden, he notices what looked like a large animal had thrashed about in the underbrush. The jungle weeds were crushed down. He saw a patch of weeds that was stained crimson, which is red for blood. Okay. And then all of a sudden, he spots a cartridge that goes to a .22 pistol. And he was thinking that this must have been a fairly large animal, and the hunter was very brave to try to be shooting it with such a small gun. Okay, so he said that he supposed that the first 3 shots he heard was when the hunter flushed his quarry and wounded it, and the last shot was when he trailed it and killed it. Okay. Then all of a sudden he sees the footprints of hunting boots. So he started to follow them. All of a sudden he comes upon many, many lights. So many lights that he thought it was a village. But to his surprise, it was a big chateau, a big palatial chateau, right? So he goes up to the door, and twice he knocks with a big heavy knocker, and then all of a sudden the door is opened by the biggest man that Rainsford had ever seen. He was a gigantic man, and he had a black beard all the way to his waist, and in his hand he was holding a long-barreled gun, and he was pointing it straight at Rainsford's heart. So Rainsford tries to tell him, "I'm no robber, I fell off a yacht," and he told him his name was Sanger Rainsford, and he's from New York City. But this giant of a man gave no sign that he understood Rainsford's words, or that he even heard what he said. And then Rainsford noticed he was dressed in a uniform, which was a black uniform trimmed with gray astrakhan, which is a fur made from the wool of young lambs. It comes from Russia. So Rainsford repeated again his name, that he fell off a yacht, and he told him, "I am hungry." The man's only reply was to raise his thumb from the hammer of his gun. And all of a sudden, the man's free hand went up to his forehead, gave him a military salute, and clicked his heels together. Okay? At this point, Rainsford could see behind him another man was coming down the marble steps of the chateau, and he was dressed in evening clothes. So he walks up to Rainsford and holds out his hand. And he says, "It is a very great pleasure and honor to welcome Mr. Sanger Rainsford, the celebrated hunter, to my home." Rainsford is very popular because he's written many books on hunting. So automatically, Rainsford shook his hands. And the man says, "I've read your books about hunting snow leopards in Tibet. I am General Zaroff." So here, Rainsford describes what the man looks like. I want you to pay close attention because there are several strange things about his physical appearance. And he says, "Ivan is an incredibly strong fellow, but he has the misfortune to be deaf and dumb." So we know now that Ivan could not speak or hear. But he also added that he was a bit of a savage. And Rainsford asked, "Is he Russian?" And he said, "He's a Cossack. So am I." So now we know that General Zaroff and Ivan are both Russians. Okay. So General Zaroff tells Rainsford to follow Ivan, and he will give him some clothes to wear. So when they enter the bedroom, Rainsford notices how beautiful the bedroom is also, but he also notices that the clothes that Ivan gives him is made from a very well-known London tailor who only sews for aristocrats or people in royalty, like dukes, okay? So they go back down to the dining room, and again, Rainsford notices how magnificent everything is uh, in this home, the linen, the crystal, the silver, the china. Also, on the way to the dining room in the hallway, he had noticed many animal heads on the walls, big animals, lions, tigers, elephants. Okay, so they eat borscht, which is a soup from Russia. They drink champagne, uh, and then they go ahead and have a conversation. And General Zaroff says, perhaps you were surprised that I recognized your name. And he explained that he read all books on hunting that's published in English, French, and Russian. And his one passion in life is the hunt. Rainsford tells him about the wonderful heads that he sees on the wall, and he says the Cape buffalo is the largest he has ever seen. The general tells him, yes, he was right, he was a monster, and that at one point he had charged him and threw him against a tree, fractured his skull. But in the end, he killed the animal. So Rainsford says, I've always thought that the Cape buffalo is the most dangerous of all big game. And the general told him, no, you are wrong. The Cape buffalo is not the most dangerous game. Here on my island, I hunt more dangerous game. So this is very surprising to Rainsford, and he says, is there a big game on this island? And the general says, yes, the biggest. And Rainsford says, oh, really? He said, yes. General Zaroff says, yes. It isn't here naturally, of course. I have to stock the island. So that gives us part 2 of the most dangerous game and a review on both parts. Our lesson for today will end here on page 61.